Hey everyone, Steven here, and you are watching the Level 1 Sword channel. And I have with me someone new who hasn't been on the channel or podcast or anything like that before, and this is David. Say hi.
Hi. And that's it. I'm going to leave now.
So what we are actually going to be talking about today, I actually didn't really want to make this video. This is a video that kind of touches on a more serious topic, and we try to cover more lighthearted things, and we like to rant about video games and movies and things like that. But we're going to actually be a more serious tone, hopefully a much more collected tone today. And we're going to be talking about the aftermath of what's been happening with the shootings in Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas. Now, if you want to get the details of what's happened with that, I'm sure you've heard about it. But if you want to get into the details, definitely feel free to look that up on your own. I am concerned though, David, because the talking points that I've been hearing since this has happened is there's two things that are kind of being sought after here. Number one, a lot of Republicans, conservatives are going after video games and kind of blaming them for, I guess, influencing people to want to commit these mass shootings. Whereas on the other side, you've got liberal Democrats going after guns and wanting to remove them and saying, well, if we didn't have guns, then we wouldn't have tragedies like this. And I kind of want to tackle both of those today. So before I got started, I just want to know what your thoughts are on the video game aspect. Do you think they're right? Do you think they have a point to what they're saying when it comes to limiting violent video games?
Sure. Well, this is, first of all, these shootings are horrific, and it's so sad that it becomes divisive. But we always want to know why. Why did this happen the way it did? And the thing about video games is it's always been people want to point the finger at video games because hey, this violent stuff creates violent people. And the thought I want to kind of just probe in people's mind is the analogy I give is like a cake. It's something happens. It's what, this cake is bad. We need to get rid of it's like saying we need to get rid of the icing on the cake, which is video games. And it's well, you wouldn't have the icing if you didn't have the cake. So all this to say is there is a level of violence in games, but if you want to point to video games, you also have to be fair and be all right, well, let's look about media in general. What about violent music, the movies we watch, the comic books that we read, the books that we engage in? The thing is, these shootings are a reflection of the culture we have, and to say that video games is the culprit is not a fair assessment. That's merely an outpouring of the kind of culture we live in because, and we'll talk about this as well, a game like Grand Theft Auto. This is a game where I personally don't play just because there is a level of violence that's just, it begs the question that makes me very nervous.
Right.
What would you do if no one was watching? And so there's some violent games where it's you have an objective, defend this, do that, aliens, fun. But with that, it's you're kind of cultivating that kind of a mindset. So all that to say is, when a game like Grand Theft Auto, how many records did that game break?
So Grand Theft Auto,
five,
just 5. Yeah, we're just talking about 5. We're not even talking about all the other ones that have also sold huge quantities. 5 has sold over 110 million copies to date. Now, I want to say it came out in 2013, so it's a 6-year-old game.
I think it was 15. Anyway,
because it came out on the 360 and the PS3.
True.
Before the new consoles launched, and it's been re-released.
We're not even talking about GTA Online now. I'm thinking Elder Scrolls is what I'm thinking.
Oh yeah. So it's sold so much and it's in so many households that you gotta wonder, well, if there are so many copies out there in the wild, why you would think that if that's causing people to become more violent, we would see much, much more violence than what we're seeing.
Right.
And I haven't seen anything from either the shooter in El Paso or Dayton saying that they were playing like they were an avid gamer, you know? Like we haven't heard that yet.
Right.
But I just kind of feel like it's a default to go to.
It's kind of a straw man's argument because, like, the point I want to make up about that is considering if we're blaming games for being violent behavior, we're looking at the culture, like the music listened to, the music watched, the games. If this is the game that, if our culture's like, we want to invest our money in that just says a lot more about the kind of people we are in this country than the kind of game it is. Personally, I would wish that game doesn't exist because, like I said,
and I don't play it either. I don't like playing games that have an options in it, or even like in GTA's case where they encourage you
indiscriminate kind of violence there.
Yeah,
because I mean, like, you know, we enjoy Halo. Gears of War is is fun, and these can be very violent games, but they do. I remember writing an essay on this, talking about psychologically it does access different parts of your brain. So you say, like, all violence is equal. It's like, you do know there's a difference between, you know, am I here to defend somebody, alien invaders, versus, you know, like,
I'm just going to walk up to a person on the street and start beating the snot out of them.
Exactly, because there has been games where I have played and I'm just like, I don't like what this just did to my soul just now. I don't want to play this anymore.
Yeah.
So all else to say is and that's why we have the rating system, like, where it's like rated M for mature, with the maturity that this person can be held, you know, knows the difference. And that's what we're hoping with the gun situation. Is like, is this person, you know, mature enough to handle this weapon? Because as you mentioned, there was, I don't know if you said there was drugs involved with this particular case.
We don't know. I know that the Dayton shooter was like, and he had obvious issues. He had a kill list for men. He had a rape list for women. He was part of, I think he was part of a band that was like, it had the word porn in the title. That's all I know. And it was a band. So how that worked out, I don't really know. So the guy had obvious issues, and his like ex-girlfriend even said, like, oh yeah, he would like show me footage from shootings and like want to know what I thought about them, and would ask me like, do I think this is cool or not?
But to come back to the point earlier, it's kind of the straw man's argument, because it's like, it's an easy thing to go after, because it's like, I don't know how many lobbyists you have in Washington saying, like, for video games, like, you know, it's easy to be like, well, let's just go after this because we can easily pin the tail on that, and we do need to be held responsible for the media we consume, games included. Yeah. But we also need to be held responsible. It's like, all right, do we have a gun issue in this country where it's like, why, you know, what's the purpose of having these firearms? And because that's one of the constitutional rights, was the right, you know, the right to bear arms. Yeah. With this idea of you're being a man of integrity, you're arming yourself, being responsible to protect yourself, your family. But I don't know if that's what we're seeing right now, and that's the issue. It's like, what's really going on here?
So yeah, and I do want to say, when it comes to video games, you know, there's an old saying that can apply to cool everyone down. Correlation does not equal causation. That means that just because you're seeing a pattern between two things doesn't necessarily mean that it's connected. Doesn't mean it's not connected, but it just means you have to do a little bit more legwork to prove that there is a link between two things. I just want to bring that up because, yes, we are seeing more and more violent video games, and we are seeing more violent crimes happen. But if you actually look at the statistics, the number of shootings sometimes doesn't actually always go up.
Doesn't spike
all the time.
Here's what my dad showed me this. This blew my mind. He was saying that the game industry makes more than the film and the music industry combined.
That is true.
Which I was like, I have to see these numbers because this blew my mind. Surprisingly, the highest, it's like 34 billion or something, but it's like the highest amount of the revenue was mobile gaming. Which I thought was interesting, because usually when people want to talk about violent video games, the thing that comes to mind is like, oh, my console, you know. What disturbed me was the fact is, like, I can go on to my Google Play Store, and I can find a number of apps. Because it's like, if you buy Halo, if you buy, any kind of game, you know what you know what game you're buying for. First of all, you're going to pay $60 for it, so you better make sure I want this game. Right. And you also know, hey, if I'm not 17, I can't buy this game anyway. But I was looking at different apps. I'm just like, these are very violent apps, and there is no cost of downloading a game, and there is no filter as to if I can download it. And that's like, that made me a little concerned. I'm like, if I'm going to play a game that does include some violence, I know what I'm walking into. I know what that mindset. But I'm like, any 6-year-old could pick up this phone, download this app, and play this.
Right. And you can't find it. You can't find a study that links violent video games to violent behavior. But my argument is, let's say you could. Okay. What's not to say that people who already are violent are most likely drawn to the more violent video games?
Which makes sense.
So you kind of don't know, well, what's causing what here? Mm-hmm. There's an argument, does life imitate art or does art imitate life? And I'm definitely on the side of art definitely imitates life. Like, art has to come from something, and it comes from our experiences and things that you might desire.
Well, I would argue, I would say that, but it's a loop.
A little bit.
Because, for example, what does a normal family look like? Mm-hmm. We don't get that from the relationships we have. We look at TV and be like, oh, that's what normal is. And that's, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's so funny. It's because, like, I love people. There's a lot of, because I've done some, I have some background in media, and I love watching just the drama of the TV shows, because it's like, can you believe what she said? It's like, yeah, that probably was the 5th take because they wanted that kind of reaction. I don't know. It's just, there's a point of media has a powerful way of influencing the way we think. Mm-hmm. There's a saying that news, but media doesn't always tell you what to think, but it does tell you what to think about. And just puts you in that kind of a mindset of like, what's normal? Okay, this must be okay then. So, because I see this on TV. And we've talked about this earlier, but this gets to the issue of, this is something I've had to really ask in my own life, is the media that I consume, does it dehumanize people? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we were talking about earlier, is this is the issue, is we don't value human life. Yeah. And the games, and that's why some games I would argue would be like, I don't like this game because this does reduce a human being to nothing, even though this is a game I'm playing here. Right. The more realistic our games get, that's an issue we're going to have to become more aware of. But, that's why, playing a cartoon game, you're like, okay, this is a cartoon. I clearly see the green blood. That's not human. Yeah. But I think that's kind of what you were talking about earlier. It's like, when we don't value human life, killing is not a big deal. It's not, human. What does it mean to be human? So, whatever. So
when it comes to the gun part of this issue, I'm just going to say, I get really irritated that if people want to make guns illegal or get guns out of the hands of people, then what needs to happen is that you pass an amendment through Congress to amend the Constitution to remove the Second Amendment. That's how you do it. Like, all of these red flag laws that they're talking about putting into place, where basically, you have something on your record, quote unquote, and because of that reason, you can't buy a gun to protect you and your family. I can't get behind that idea. The idea of like further background checks, and to me, if you have a universal background check, by the way, these background checks would not have stopped either of these shooters because they didn't have a criminal record. You don't have a criminal record, what's a background check going to find? Mm-hmm. Nothing. So you either go with that and have that be your result, in which case background checks aren't going to do anything to help, or you expand background checks and make it so that it delves deeper. It delves into, what are you posting on social media? What are you saying to your friends and family? Like, because you mentioned this one guy, and that's what you mentioned the one guy was like showing videos to his girlfriend. Of shootings. So, he was showing shootings on like social media. He was like, hey, check this out. Do you think this is cool? Like, not that he committed it, but he was like... Right, he was fascinated with it. Now, on one end, I do think that he should have been... this should be reported. And by the way, this happens a lot. Maybe we should actually have like part of the background checks. You have to go see a therapist just to like tell me about your childhood. It's like, you have to pay for 3 sessions of therapy. Just see what comes to the surface here. And plus, it's like, hey, you might need it anyway for just stuff in life. Who knows? But this actually happens more often than not. We just don't get it reported because it's not that interesting of a story. Sure. We're in the 24-hour news cycle where they've been talking about this for a week non-stop now. people do actually get stopped from committing mass shootings all the time, but we never hear about it. We only hear about the ones that actually get through. I heard about a grandmother who was concerned that her grandson was collecting all these guns, and it turns out he was planning to do something, and he was, you know, he was stopped. I don't think he was arrested because, I mean, he didn't commit a crime, but, you know, he's getting help. He's getting help with that. But it all comes down to, before I get to that, actually, Samuel L. Jackson, who you all know as Nick Fury and plenty of other famous quotes. I don't normally like to quote celebrities because most of the time celebrities really don't know what they're talking about. They have a microphone, they have a camera in front of them, and they have a large audience, so they're just like, okay, well, I'll give my opinion on this thing that I've never once done a lick of research on. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Samuel L. Jackson, he said, "I don't think it's about more gun control. I grew up in the South with guns everywhere, and we never shot anyone. This is about people who aren't taught the value of life." Mm-hmm. And I do want to get into that now. Let's talk about how secular and non-caring our society has become. And I would argue that that video games that do show extreme gore, extreme violence, that is a symptom, along with shootings, of a collective disregard for human life. So to me, it's like I'm looking at this as from a pragmatic stance. Do we want to go after the symptoms, or do we want to go after the cause of those symptoms? Mm-hmm. So yeah, what did you have more to say on that? You touched on that a little bit earlier.
No, just I totally agree. It's like it's easier to want to put a Band-Aid on something because then we can keep on going we can keep doing it without actually dealing with it, because then we're like, well, it feels like we're doing something, and then we're surprised when nothing's changed. Yeah. Someone once said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah, and that's what we keep doing. Mm-hmm. Like, so we're insane as a society. This is something that I didn't even know. Apparently, it's not even mass shootings are considered a federal crime. Like, they go beyond the state level of jurisdiction. So when you commit a mass shooting, you shoot a dozen people, you're going to be dealing with the feds at that point if you survive, assuming. It's not even a capital crime, and a capital crime is a crime which deserves the capital punishment, the death penalty. So if you can go out and kill a dozen people, you're not even going to face the death penalty for that. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, I think we need to make people need to be afraid to commit shootings. Like, I have no problem with people fearing,
like, what's the
consequences.
What's the retribution of my actions here?
Right, and we don't, because what's going to happen to this guy in I know one of them was actually killed. I think it was I don't know if it was, I think it was the El Paso guy or the guy, because I think they're talking to the Dayton shooting. But he's going to get the worst that's going to happen to him is he's going to go into a maximum security prison and live there the rest of his days. 3 square meals a day at taxpayer expense. I don't see that as much of a punishment considering what he did. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot of people in this country that are against the death penalty. They think it's immoral or it's wrong. But, you know, at the same time, like, I would like to ask someone, like, what should be more safe? And this kind of crosses into another topic we won't get into too much today, but should a jail cell be safer than the womb of a mother? Because in this country we've got it backwards. You're safer in jail than you are when you are a baby in your mom because of abortion laws in this country. And abortion laws just feed into the whole you're not worth anything, because when you're before you're born, you have 0 rights. You can be killed and no one's there to protect you. And we're kind of getting a little short on time, so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. We should probably get into some final thoughts here too.
Well, I know it's kind of like that's another huge issue to bring in there, because a lot of people want to argue, and rightly so, it's like, this mother, she's afraid, you don't know her situation. But what we're talking about here is the value of human life. And regardless if this is an issue on abortion, whether this is an issue in, the shooting and the death penalty here, these are some heavy issues here. And we're all asking, like, where do video games come in all this?
Right.
But we've talked about it already, but just the value of human life. And I would argue that I'm still leaning more towards the death penalty, and that's not because I don't value human life. I want people to understand that's like, when you do a consequence, when you have an action, there must be a consequence to that. And the question of justice is, what is the correct level of consequence to that action that you commit? Whether that's a good thing or that's a bad thing. Like, you help somebody out, trust is built. There's a relationship that's formed. That is a good consequence to that action. When you steal from somebody, justice would demand, oh, right, you need to pay that guy back. And maybe, perhaps what the situation is, probably a little bit more for the inconvenience, because I don't know if you broke other things in the meantime, but it's like, what's the correct level of retribution for paying back? And if we don't value human life as like, well, you killed somebody, but we're not going to, if you don't forfeit your own life, then life doesn't really have that great of a meaning. So that was what I would argue with the death penalty is it's not that we want to just start killing people. That's not the goal.
No, of course not. But it is a deterrent. I think there's a famous line of like someone who was going to execution by guillotine, and they were walking down, and of course the mob is all worked up, and one guy from the mob calls to one of the executioners like, "Do you really think this is going to deter crime?" And he says, "It will for him." I mean, that's what, this is going to sound a bit cold-hearted, but what do you do with cancer? You cut it out of the body. You remove it. In society, if you think of society as a body of sorts, cancer is people who kill other people. And you need to remove it. Now, a lot of people say, well, yeah, you remove it. You put it in the prison. You put them in the prison system. But those same people will say, like, our prison system is so corrupt. You're right, it's so corrupt. It's corrupt, but it's also bloated because we have all of these people who commit horrible crimes, and they're living, they're breathing, they're drawing breath. And there are instances where we just had I don't know if you heard about this woman, I forget her name, but she was being trafficked at the age of like 16, and she killed she killed a real estate agent who bought her for the evening, and she feared for her life, so she killed him, and then she has been in jail for like over a decade. This is here in Tennessee, and Governor Bill Lee actually basically canceled her life in prison sentence. She basically is getting parole, because she is like, not only is she sorry, but it's like, well, she was fearful over her own life. Should she really have been charged with this? In those circumstances, like, yeah, I'm not like, yeah, death penalty, because it's not so clear.
But you're talking about the justice of the situation there. It's like, this isn't, because we're talking about these situations in El Paso and in Dayton, it's like, this is indiscriminate. What's the motive behind this? What's the person's story? That is like fear for life. Like, that's where it's like, we want to realize this is a very delicate, issue, like the death penalty. We don't invoke that easily because we do value human life, but we need people to understand, like, there is a consequence to this. This is where it stops.
Right. And there's no contrition either shown. Like, they are completely okay with their actions, and they seem,
or they're justified by it.
Yeah, and I'm sure in some some plane of thought they are in their own head.
Only I'm saying, when we do wrong things in the moment, maybe later we might regret it, but in the moment we will find justification for it. No one does an evil action with enthusiasm unless they find they're the hero of it.
No one is the villain in their own story.
Right.
Everyone's the hero.
There's anyway, that's irrelevant, but I'll just say, there's a poster, I like it. It says, it's Darth Vader. It says, good leaders don't tear down the people, they lift them up. And it's the scene where he's and it says, Darth Vader, philanthropist.
Well, that's a bit of a light note to end things on.
No, but all that to say is, but thank you for having me on the show. But yeah, I think it's just, this is good to talk about, where at the end of the day, I just want to close with this, is games can be a fun way to unite people, but we do want to be smart about the way we play our games. Just as we want to be smart about the way we consume any kind of media we consume. Because, yeah, there are some good movies out there, and there are some movies that are absolute garbage that you don't want in your head. And games is just another form of media where it's like, yeah, but are your parents involved with your choice in those games? Are you building relationships with those games? Are you isolating yourself because you're playing these games? Because I would, if this guy was around healthier people, a better sense of community, I don't know what his family upbringing was like, with his parents involved in his life. All these are factors that's like pour into who is this guy now? What is he trying to get out of this? And so games can be, like any media, can be a great opportunity to unite people, because we love talking about the new Kingdom Hearts game and stuff like that. That's not violent at all. Like that would get even newsworthy attention, but they're just fun games, and we unite around the fiction of it all, like any media. But it's just being aware of the media you consume is so important.
And a lot of your views will be shaped on whether or not you think that people are naturally good or naturally evil. Like what is our natural tendencies toward? If you think that people are naturally good, you're going to think that, well, if we just remove harmful things in their life that they're exposed to, then they'll be fine. I would argue that's not the case. People are still going to tend to do evil things.
And some people may disagree with that, but I think everyone would agree that maybe someone might agree that we're naturally evil, but we're naturally selfish.
Oh, definitely.
Which prones to a great many of evil.
Right.
Because we want what we want.
Very true. Well, that's all from us. Let us know in the comments below what you think. And don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys.